I'm Clésia Mendes, and welcome to the second season of Womanhood from the Inside Out. In this interview series, we'll be discovering and uncovering the nature of womanhood from the inside out. Why is it important? When does it show? How can we identify it? And what are the implications of womanhood from the inside out? And today's guest is my dear friend Leslie Sann. Leslie is the author of the award-winning book Life Happens, What Are You Going to Do About It? It has been called a catalyst for awakening, and her clients' lives are transformed as they learn to live by design rather than by default while creating a life they love. For almost 30 years, Leslie has served through her writing, teaching, and coaching, helping change the way people think about who they are and what they can do, empowering them into a greater authenticity and expression of their gifts into the world. Leslie also provides leadership and personal development workshops to transform consciousness, balance the heart and the mind, develop emotional intelligence, and enhance relational skills. She is currently excited about the workshops and retreats she is offering, supporting people in embracing the power of their presence. When we are present, there is peace. Where there is peace, there is wisdom. And where there is wisdom, we have everything we need to live a joyful life. Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a joy to be with you. You're such a delight.
Thank you for that. You are so welcome. So, Leslie, how did you first came across the inside out understanding of life?
Well, it was many years ago, decades ago, when I was struggling in my life and not aware that I was living from a consciousness of a victim to circumstances. Somehow having lived from a conditioned reality as to what I should be doing, living from an ego identity, striving to be a good girl into the world, and then my life not working out the way I thought it was going to. And in that falling apart, which looked like a marriage coming to an end and my life circumstances drastically changing, I reached out for help. And I had been in personal growth since my sophomore year in college, meditating and doing yoga and workshops. But at that point, I got involved with something called Insight seminars. And it was back in the day when EST was really big and LifeSpring. And it was a whole part of consciousness waking up on the planet. And one of the most powerful, and this one was called the Awakening Heart Seminar. And is very heart-centered learning. But one of the most powerful things, and there are many, many powerful gifts I received, was the awareness of the choice to see my life as a victim or to be accountable or creative, responsible towards co-creating with life itself a circumstance I prefer to live in. And that's an inside-out job. And Viktor Frankl said in his beautiful book, A Man's Search for Meaning, that the most liberating expression a human being can have is their choice as to how they relate to their circumstances. And that's powerful life. That means regardless of circumstances, I can live a joyful life while changing my circumstances to something I prefer to live in. So that was the beginning of my inside out life. And it was also the inspiration for the work I do today, because it was such a huge shift in my consciousness that I wanted to be somebody to give that into the world for other people, because I'm not the person I was as a result. And I'm only grateful for that shift.
That is wonderful. Thank you. Now, I'm curious about the word accountable. It seems that there is a certain degree of empowerment linked to the word accountable. Would you like to expand on that further?
Sure. I mean, that's the word that was used in the workshop. I've heard people call it victim owner. I like to call it victim victorious. It's a matter of, life happens is the title of my book. It'll disturb us, upset us. It's designed to do that, to wake us up to possibility. We'll fall down, but then we'll stand back up. We have a choice to stand back up. Some people don't stand back up and they just lay on the floor complaining that they got tripped up. But that standing back up is that place of empowerment. So I can choose to learn from the experience that upset me. I can choose to look at it as a classroom for learning, for me to wake up to new possibilities and what is it I can do to engage in my life in new ways, to either develop myself as a human being on the inside or to create something even more exciting on the outside, or most likely both at the same time. So yes, huge empowerment. Power is, I have a chapter in my book about power. It's not about power. It's about learning to take effective action. Power comes from a French word that means to be able. So it's really the choice to engage in action, and action always produces a result that we can learn from.
And I love that when you were talking about power coming from the French word to be able, because sometimes I hear about the word to feel empowered. It's like almost like it's someone giving someone else the ability of to be able. But what I'm hearing is that intrinsically we do have that ability of making things happen.
Excuse me. When we are able to accept that there are possibilities in life, then that moves us into action. Like, I can see that I can have or create something, and then I'm willing to move towards it. And so that's an empowerment move, even if what I see is that I can be a peaceful presence in this moment. So it may not even be an outer doing, but it can be learning how to take an inner action of quieting myself down, not engaging in personal thinking, coming to a deeper place of quiet, letting wisdom reveal itself. All that is action, even though there's no external witnessing of the body doing anything. So when I can see I can be a peaceful presence in the world, and that's a powerful place to live, then I'm willing to do what it takes to learn how to become that for myself.
Wow, I really love that example. I love the example for so many reasons. And when you were sharing that taking action could be to be a peaceful presence in the world, the word the personality that jumped into mind was Gandhi, that he was able to lead a movement. And I don't know if this saying is correct or not, but at least the internet says that he said so, that if he had a lot to do in that day, he'd say, well, with the amount of work I have to do today, I need to meditate as much as twice as I usually would. So there is kind of linking into being peaceful would be linked to being effective in the world.
Well, is that your experience?
Let me think. Yes. I experience both directions in being into a flurry of activity and making many things happen, and I also experience being in a more peaceful state and taking time to meditate early in the morning and not taking as much activity, but having taking highly leveraged actions.
So to me, there's like, it's not about peace means I'm not in action. I heard it once, it's like, instead of doing my doing, I'm being my doing. So there's a way to be in action that comes from a peaceful flow, a slowing down, being able to engage on the outside while having an inner listening at the same time. And there was an article that someone sent to me that this man wrote that he used to really be striving to do his bike run and pushing, and he would clock it at 43 minutes. And one day he decided to enjoy the experience, and it only took him 2 minutes longer to complete the run. And he had a totally different experience of those 45 minutes instead of the 43. So it's not that we're not engaged in action. It's like, how are we being inside ourselves in relationship to our experience?
That is a great example from the bicycle, taking an extra 2 minutes and having a totally different experience. Now, By the way, thank you very much for sending me a copy of the book. It was the first time that I had a guest sending me the book up front, and once I had it, I for the audience who knows me well, I'm an avid reader. I love reading, so that means I've got a pile of books on the go. So when I received one more, I was like, oh God. But to honor the gift, I felt that I needed to read it, and I was amazed in a positive way because I was loving the book. And mostly I love the way you open the book with the first story when you climb in the tree. Would you mind sharing the story with our audience?
Oh, not at all. I was in a 35-day training and learning how to be in a process. I was actually began working with Insight seminars, and I was in the process of training to facilitate. And one of the experiences they offered us was a ropes course. And we were out in the California wilderness, and there was a whole day load of events, and this one was called the High Tree Event. If anybody knows a ropes course, some people call it the telephone pole, but we were in the woods, so we were actually climbing this giant tree. And there was a rope ladder on the side of the tree that we were to use to get up to this tiny little platform in the top of the tree, where the goal was to leap from the platform and grab onto a trapeze. And just all the audience knows we were belayed, which means we had a harness and a rope. So if you leaped or fell on the way up the tree, that it was a safety net, and it was all, carefully structured so that you could have the experience without getting hurt. And so as I was climbing up the rope, George, who was facilitating the event and who owned the company that did the trainings, was holding the rope ladder, so it was nice and steady, and I was having no trouble climbing up the side of the tree. When halfway up the tree, he let go of the ladder, and now the thing is wobbling, and I was pissed. It's like, what is he doing? I mean, that's not very nice. And the mind starts going into story, and I realized I was watching the event enough to know he wasn't going to grab the rope again, that was part of my next challenge. And so I calmed myself down to go back to what we were talking about. So in the place of just bringing myself present, it was, now what? Well, and then my creative mind kicked in, and then I figured out I could push my feet closer to the tree, and instead of counting on George to hold me steady, I could hold myself steady using the tree as an anchor into the earth. And I was able to get to the top of the tree that way. And I get to the top, and I'm all like, yay. And it's this tiny little thing up there. And so now the goal is to turn myself around so that I could leap for the trapeze, because clearly that's what I was going to do, go for the goal. And as I'm turning myself around, George interrupts me, and he says, I'm going to challenge you even further. He says, what are you going to do? I says, I'm going to go for the trapeze. He says, I'm going to challenge you. I want you to turn back around and fall backwards, which really made me mad. Again, that's like clearly, one of my default emotional responses when life doesn't go the way I think it's going to go. I get, what? And I went, and he goes, yeah, because he was aware that I'm someone who always goes for the goal. I'm going, doing. So he was challenging that pattern of behavior in me. And I saw the challenge, and I kind of grumpily, because I'm going to meet that challenge too, right? Because it's my next trapeze, turned around, and I don't know if I put my hands over my chest and just fell backwards, which is enormous thing to do, is just to surrender and fall backwards. And I fell backwards, and, the belay caught me, and I bounced, and there was an assistant who grabbed me on the bottom and steadied me, and I'm shaking all over. I mean, it was exhilarating. And she looks me in the eyes, and she says, how are you? And I was immediately dismissing the whole thing. I said, that was easy. I mean, it just didn't count to me because it was easy. And she looked me in the eye, and she went, powerful people make things easy. Mm. And it was so huge for me. It's like, what is she talking about? And that statement stayed with me for such a long time. And I chewed on it and chewed on it. What does that mean? Am I powerful? Is that why it was easy? I mean, it was like this huge pattern interrupt. And it became an observing sentence that I started to sort my world in. What does that mean? Powerful makes things easy. What is powerful? And that really became the seed for so much of my work. And it's the reason it's the first chapter in the book, because to me, George is life happening. You know, George is that which happens, what is it? John Lennon says, life happens when you're busy making other plans. George is life happening. I thought he was going to be holding the rope. I thought I had this as a goal, and he kept changing the rules on me. And so how am I going to be in relationship to life on life's terms and still move forward and live in empowerment and joy and excitement about my life rather than complaining it didn't happen the way I wrote it down? And so that pretty much is the foundation of the book and the work that I do with clients, because we have to learn how to be flexible and be able to move with life and not fall into victim consciousness, but be victorious as far as being a learner and growing ourselves into something next, because I really believe life has my best interests at heart. George had my best interests. He wasn't trying to be mean to me. He was really encouraging me to become more than I knew myself to be. And he changed my life. And he's changed so many people's life through me, because he woke me up to something I hadn't seen before. And to me, that's the joy of coaching, is to give that to people. That sense of what else is there that I can't see right now because I'm blind out of habit.
And I love that story for so many reasons. It's like, I could say it's a metaphor, but it wasn't, if it wasn't for the fact that really happened. But he did exactly what you said, George representing life. So you had a plan, you thought the original goal was to climb up to the top of tree and then grab the trapeze and off you go, mission accomplished. But then it gets changed. And my first reaction when I was reading the book, I was like, for God's sake, George, you can't do your job properly. We can't trust these people. But then I was reading the book, no judgment whatsoever right there. And then I kept reading. And actually, as you described the reaction you had, you got centered, and you thought, oh, now what? And then in that moment, you had the insight. If I put my feet further, actually, I can ground myself against a tree, and then I can keep climbing. And then things change again. And the question is, and now what? And that allows you to move forward quicker and with more ease. And instead of looking into the past and attempting to blame, because is not relevant anymore. That was the original plan, but things changed. And that is, someone said, in life, the only constant is change, because things are always changing, and for a variety of reasons. I guess I don't know.
Said that. Chang Tzu said that. He was a student of Lao Tzu.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah. So this is it. That's the power move, right? Because life will happen and we'll be upset. So we'll react because we live in human animal bodies and we have a survival instinct. But then we could either stay, and I call it the hamster wheel of Hades, like blaming George and judging George and all the things that we do, because that's what we do. It's not bad, but it's like not very effective either. It's not empowered. And so the word react, if you switch it, if you change the letters, or reactive, you can turn it into the same letters. The word is creative. So that moment where I pause and I go, okay, now what? These are my new circumstances. I'm going to be responsible versus reactive, which means I am aware I have the ability to respond. That means I have choices. So in the now what, I open up the creative brain, and now I lift out of my animal reactivity into my human creativity. That's powerful. Creativity is where we're powerful. And that's unique to us as human beings. We can reference the past, imagine a future, and take actions in right now. That doesn't mean our future is going to be what we see it as, but we're going to move forward in discovery. So I love that. Creative, Reactive, oh, inside of that is the intrinsic power move, which is my creativity, which is wonder. Now what?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I never quite saw that reactive creative. I really like that.
Me too. So, I mean, anytime I share with a client, they get it. And so there's nothing wrong with being reactive. It actually, we could use it as a waking up point. Oh, I'm in that place again. Oh, now what? Oh, I can lift. What's the creative solution here?
Mm, mm.
But life is about having problems.
Yes,
Right?
it is true. Yes.
It's challenging. It's designed that way. I
Mm-hmm.
have a person, a client who was we'll call him Robert, and he was telling me about a situation with his late wife, and she had cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a doctor, and he came home from work, and as was his habit, he was just downloading his day, and his day was filled with challenges and problems and difficulties. And she's laying on the couch, and she's apparently, in a very weak state, and she had been resting, and she looks at him and she says, Robert, problems exist in the world of the living.
Mm.
And it just like stopped him. And when he told me, my heart started to tear. It was just like so poignantly true. We complain about problems, but that's what life is about. It's not about the problems. It's about the joy of finding the solutions.
Mm-hmm.
It's how are we going to see this?
Mm-hmm.
Inside of every problem, there's the possibility of something else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's so interesting because when I started looking at the direction of the inside out understanding, I thought, oh, is this positive thinking? Because I really love positive thinking. I've been doing for a long time, and I pride myself in developing creative solutions. And then I realized for myself it was something beyond that. It's just really being aware that circumstances actually are irrelevant because we are always feeling our thinking taking form in a moment, regardless. So it has nothing to do with the circumstances. In the same way, someone may crumble with a problem. Someone else may thrive with the exact same problem. So it has nothing to do with the circumstances. Once we start seeing for ourselves that we are living the feeling of thought taking form in a moment, right? And that the way we experience life is not so much connected to our circumstances. How is that relevant? Where do we go from here?
When you started looking at that for yourself, what did you discover?
At first, I became reflective. And one of the things that I've noticed is that, yes, one of the things that I've noticed is that throughout the years, by going through the path of personal development, I developed what some people call the positive mental attitude. So almost happened without me noticing. So if a situation happens, I can ask myself, wow, what else is possible? What is right about this I'm not getting? And I can see at least 3 possible solutions. It just happens. And I used to think that in order to live a great life, I needed to be always in a positive state. I needed to see always the bright side of life, right? That was the way of doing life. That was my way of doing life. And that I would be only okay if everyone else was also okay. So everyone else would be also happy. And you're laughing because you see the cosmic joke there already. So basically, that meant that I was putting on myself, on my shoulders, the hard work of making everyone else happy, right? So that is very unsettling because life happens and people are going to react in whatever they're going to react. And we do have free will. And I was interfering with that with good intentions. But someone said something interesting about having good intentions. So for me, to start with, it was a learning experience of discovering that I am okay. And I don't know how this is going to sound, but I am okay even if other people are not experiencing being okay. Because
Beautiful.
I can see from myself, number one, that I've got innate health well-being, in the same way that I recognize innate well-being in other people as well.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I also see that there is free will, and people choose to experience whatever they choose to experience.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that is what I recognize. Yeah. Wow. That.
Well, that's beautiful because that's a journey, right? Because it's still, if everybody else has to be happy, you're still outside in.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so taking, the inside out process to me is a process, it's deepening. We're always in the process of awakening to even more. We never get there. There's ongoing expansion.
Mm-hmm.
And as I expand, I may perhaps bang into parts of my thinking that I wasn't aware was present. And I meet that. And now I go, oh, in a little bit of a contraction. So what is that thinking? What's that limitation that's of thought that's creating this feeling? And then I get to love that until it dissolves, because it's just thought that's been
Mm.
habituated. And so it feels more substantial than just brain energy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I meet it from that place of peace or insight or wisdom, from the inside to that, and it goes away, and then there's more expansion.
Mm-hmm.
For me, once I became aware that it's an inside out life, it's like, well, what is that that's on the inside? I call that, like, what is that that breathes me? What is that that lives me?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm really in tune with it, it's an energy it's a presence of loving, it's a presence of calm, it's a presence of joy.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's like, I stop identifying myself with my outer circumstances or my successes or how things are going out here, because I see Earth as a classroom
Mm-hmm.
to help me grow into a greater awareness and presence of peace on the planet, or love on the planet. And that I see as my ministry. I see that as my intention for life, is to be a positive contribution from the inside out. Not
Mm-hmm.
because I'm doing something out here that's making a difference, but because I am holding an energy of a peaceful presence, which, when we go back to Gandhi meditating more,
Mm-hmm.
to me, it wasn't that he was going to do less that day, but he was going to really drop into peace, so that when he did his work, he could really be holding that energy and that contribution of peace through the doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And so I don't know, I just stopped, but let me see if there's another sentence. Is that landing, or how is that landing inside you?
It is, yes, it is landing, and it makes sense. It makes sense. And yes, yes, please carry on. This a story occurred to me, but then it went. It's fine. We'll come back to me in a bit.
And so I guess I don't have anything else to say. One of the excitements that I have right now, I mean, I've been facilitating people's living by design, which is like, well, what does that really mean? It means loving the design, the package I come in. So loving my humanity, learning
Mm-hmm.
how to really be in love with my humanity, which includes all the foibles, mistakes, silly things, the judgments, all the things that we do as human beings. Loving this package I come in, which also includes the gifts that I have to offer into the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then designing a life that I would prefer to live in from that place of loving myself versus who I should think I should be in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to really know what that is, we have to drop into the place of what is loving myself. And what is it to truly love another person? And some of what's loving another person is allowing them the dignity of their process. So if they're in a reactive place and they're choosing, because they don't know any better, to be upset, I can love them in their upset. Just like I can love myself in my upset. I don't have to be upset that I'm upset.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to add negativity to the negativity.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's the key. And if I'm not upset, I'm upset, then I am something more than my upset. So then I can drop into that deeper place of wisdom that's just noticing there's upset going on, whether it's the mind creating feelings.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, that's all okay. And as soon as I drop into the acceptance that that's just the experience I'm having, or that's the experience that person's happening, all is well.
Mm.
I drop into that well-being, that beingness that is just fine. And then that's the peace that comes present.
Yes. I'm glad you spoke about that. I remember someone giving the example that moods are like the weather, right? So us, the human beings, we are the blue sky, and then we see clouds, and sometimes fluffy clouds, sometimes deep blue sky, sometimes dark clouds. And as long we're not too attached to the moods, it just keep passing by. Some clouds stay a little bit longer, but it's always moving and changing colors and so on. And so if we are upset and we become upset because of the upset, then we kind of identifying with the clouds, and it goes beyond that. It just moves. It keeps moving. We don't need to do anything about it.
Well, or we could see it also. I love the imagery of a ocean.
Okay.
And so what if, the consciousness is on the surface, it's disturbed and it's having white caps. And if I can drop to the still place that's underneath the movement of the surface,
Mm-hmm.
then I can recognize that the waves just come and go.
Mm-hmm.
It's just what happens on the surface of where the water meets the air.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other cool thing is, if I really drop deep, deep down, I realize that all waves are sourced from the same ocean. The breath that's breathing me is the same breath that's breathing you. There's a oneness in all of humanity. We're sourced from the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's a beautiful place of connection that we can have when we recognize that.
Yes. Yes. I also like that metaphor. Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Now, something that occurred to me about practical situations. For example, if someone they were married, but then they became divorced, and they were saying, okay, how does knowing the inside out nature of life helps me to deal with my divorce? What sort of advice would you give me? Well, I never been married. What sort of advice would you give them? got into character there.
Well, I wouldn't just give generic advice
Mm-hmm.
without understanding the circumstances the person found themselves in, because to me that matters as far as what it's like. The circumstances are the classroom. So some people would get divorced for very different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
What it is that the consciousness was trying to teach itself.
Mm-hmm.
So number one is, to me, to bring yourself to a place of peace. So any place that's upset is an opportunity for learning. So I have an education. I graduated University of Santa Monica in 1988. And one of the foundational statements is, I'm upset because. There is no because. I'm just upset.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as we learn, I'm upset because my marriage fell apart. No, you're not. You're just upset. So let's look at the upset. So back to what's the thinking that's creating the upset?
Mm-hmm.
And I can engage and look at that thinking and unravel it to the point of that thinking clearly isn't serving me. I may have judgments in that thinking that something should have happened or shouldn't have happened. The reality, life happened. This is what is. What am I going to do with it? If I can forgive myself for judging that it should have been other than it was, I could come to peace. I can look at what I learned, what the blessings of the experience was, how it served me to become somebody I wouldn't have been otherwise. What's the harvest of the experience? How am I richer as a result? I mean, I can just change my whole relationship with what occurred if I choose to just embrace it. And the upset is always an opportunity to love myself even more. It's like we're all learning the same thing. how to love ourselves and each other even better. And anytime we're upset, we have the opportunity to love more. And then it's learning what that means in each situation. How do I go about doing that? It's very practical.
It is. It is. And one of the things that I've noticed, you use the word loving myself more, self-love more a few times. So would you like to speak a little bit more about self-love? How do you perceive it?
When I'm at peace, I'm in love. When I'm upset, there's some part of me that's disconnected from that deep part of the ocean. And so the process of loving that is just like kind of calling it home. Does that make so? The Sufis say that the spiritual path is a journey of remembering the truth of who I am, that I am the ocean. I'm not the wave on the top of the ocean. I'm not my personal thinking. That what is moving this body, this life energy, is so much more than our thinking. And it's remembering ourselves back to that truth and living from the depth, from the well of our being into the world. That's self-love. And anytime I'm misidentified with myself as the cloud or the surface wave, it's just a misidentification, and love would bring that misunderstanding home to itself and bring it back to peace. And then from peace, we're present, and with presence, we're guided forward from the inside out. It's an inside out movement when I'm sitting in peace, because then wisdom will tell me a next action.
That is so beautiful, and a story that just occurred to me from a few years back. So basically, I was living in a town, and then I decided to move to a different town because I liked this other town better. There was this vibe that I loved, and I just wanted to move to that new place. And it turns out the new place was a little bit more upper scale, so it was a bit more expensive. So as a first trial, one of the things that worked really well for me was to live in a house share, to share the house with someone else. So I went to one of those websites where you find someone to share a house with, and I found someone, and obviously I did background checks and everything else to make sure that I was keeping safe.
Practical spirituality.
Absolutely.
Taking care of yourself, good girl.
So I did all the background checks, find out where the person worked and so on. So we had put the contract in place, and I moved in, and it was great for the first 9 months, but then the person changed. So there was a strange vibe without getting too much detail. So, and I recognized that was about time for me to move to a different place, but I still wanted to stay in the same city because I still had a good job there, and instead of becoming stressed out about it, one of the things that I started doing quite intuitively, that I didn't know about the stuff that we are talking right now, is that I started going for walks, spending a lot of time in a gym. I love going to the gym in a space of joy, enjoying myself, taking care of myself, taking care of my body. I was reading and listening to Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, and so on. So, it wasn't a plan that I set up in place. It turns out that while that was going on, I started doing these things. And then that went on for about 2 weeks while I had a situation with a housemate that was feeling strange. And then one of these days I'm going for a walk, and out of the blue, I almost had this voice saying, put an advert on the internet. And I did just that. I've learned throughout life that I don't argue with wisdom. If I get something like that so strong, I just take action straight away. I don't judge it or something like that. So I put an advert on the internet, and within 2 hours I got a reply. So I answered the person back, and the person told me where they live and say, "Oh, you can move with us." I was like, "Fantastic! When can I go and see the property?" And the person was very keen and said, "You can come tomorrow." So it turns out that it was a shorter distance from my job, so it was even better than the place that I was living before, that I wanted to move from. So I went to do the viewing the following day. The landlord loved me. I loved the place as well. Excellent value for money. I left the deposit straight away. So it was like in less than 24 hours, I had a new place. And I said, well, I did sign an agreement with the other person. So I want to honor that agreement that I would give them notice. But from the X date, I'll be moving in. And the gentleman was, oh yeah, you can move in tomorrow if you want to. And anyhow, and then I needed to take care of the move. Uh, I don't drive. So I spoke with a colleague at work, and my colleague was like, oh, yeah, I can help you with the move. So all of a sudden, I had this car and I had this person help me out. And it was so easy, one thing after the other. And one of the things that I really remember is that I was in that state of peace. I wasn't what some people call putting my head on the sand. I wasn't pretending the situation wasn't happening. I was very aware, okay, there is a change in circumstances, and I started doing those things. So it turns out that is what I was doing, and then I had that insight, took action, and it was extremely easy. So yeah, it was a situation that occurred to me out of the
I
blue.
love that story. That's a
Hmm.
great story about inside out and co-creativity with life,
Hmm.
partnering with life, assuming, of course, you'd be upset the person after 9 months changed.
Hmm.
But what if that was for you, which clearly, based on your story, it was like George
Yes.
let go of the rope, but it was for me.
Hmm.
And if we can go, oh, this is for me, that means something equal to or better is available. I have to take action and find out what life wants to give me. And you
Hmm.
just showed up empty and willing
Hmm.
to be led forward without knowing where you're going.
Yes.
And look at the beautiful outcome you created by your willingness and your choice to act.
Hmm.
It's a gorgeous story of co-creativity. That's what I call living by design. You know,
Ah.
it's a listening from the inside, knowing that I act and I'll produce a result. I'll learn from that result, and I keep listening and moving, and sometimes out there says on course, off course. So
Hmm.
when you went to see the property, it was like closer to my place, you know, lovely landlord, all of that on course.
Yes.
Thank you, roommate, for turning out differently than I would have imagined. And
Yes.
to go back to your earlier question about your divorce, what if it's just a story we're supposed to live together till we die? One of us dies first. And what if that spouse was the perfect experience to bring me to next?
Hmm.
And it's not wrong or bad that the marriage ended, but it was the opportunity to move from here to there. And then when I got there, it was time to move on to something else. And it's just our story that it should have turned out differently that's making us miserable.
Wow. I'm so glad you said that. I just had an insight on that. And it's so funny. Yeah, several situations, something that happened that I was thinking, oh, I didn't want it to change, but it turns out that the change was great. It was a lot better than I was expecting. Yes.
And what if we always assume that? What if
Ah.
always, if we just decided to choose the thought, if when I'm upset, well, this didn't go the way I wanted to, blah, blah, blah. It's like, wait, calm down. What if this is better than I imagined? What if life wants to give me more than I know to ask for? You know, it's like having on Easter Sunday, I don't know if you do this where you live, but in America, people hide Easter eggs. Do they do that?
I think they do, but I don't have any kids, so I don't follow that.
They hide Easter eggs and the kids go looking for the Easter eggs. And why do the kids go looking? Because they know there are Easter eggs there.
Hmm.
So if we don't go looking for the blessings and the circumstances, we won't find them. So part of going to look is, again, seeing the possibility. We've all been, I'm imagining anybody listening or watching the show has been on this planet long enough to look in hindsight and have many, many experiences where life turned out better than they imagined when the circumstances went other than planned.
Wow.
So there's plenty of evidence to say, you know what? I bet you something even better is coming to me now. I wonder what it is. And open to start seeing it. Because then we change everything. Now, it may be coming anyway, and we may be complaining about it, but it might really come more quickly and easily, like your beautiful story, if we just open to receive while taking action.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the timing was so perfect. It just remind me of another story, actually. It happened. So last week I was in Tenerife in the Canary Islands. And there was this pond with frogs. So one of my friends says, we were coming out of the restaurant and she said, oh, I would like to see the frogs. We kind of running late, so I was like, okay, I'll go with her to see the frogs. And then it was very lush green leaves, and all I could see was the leaves, but I could hear the frogs. And she was like, oh, there are the frogs. I was like, I can't see anything. So I kept looking. I could definitely hear the frogs, but I couldn't see the frogs. So just the leaves. And the more intently I looked, then all of a sudden I started seeing frogs. So the frogs were already there, but they were camouflaged
Yeah.
between the leaves. So I thought, oh, surely those must be like only one or two frogs and they are very loud. But then the more I looked, then I started noticing, oh, there was one, two, three, four. Oh my God, so many. And I could hear it, but I couldn't see it. And as long I kept looking, the more the
Right.
frogs revealed themselves to me. So it was a very interesting
But
experience.
that's a beautiful story because you trusted your friend that they were there.
Hmm.
You stayed committed to finding them.
Hmm.
And how often do we give up because we don't see things right away? So if
Mm.
you could have given up and stayed miserable with that roommate that wasn't working out for you because you couldn't see the possibility of something better.
Mhm.
But instead you go, no, this can work out, and I'm going to just participate until I find out a better solution to my situation. The same thing with the frogs. No, there are frogs here.
Mhm.
And I'm just going to hang in here till they reveal themselves to me. And that's basically till my brain changes its filtering mechanism so that pops in.
I love the way you said it. I didn't have the language and you just gave me the language until my brain changes its filtering mechanism. Love it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. That is definitely from the inside out to change the vision. Leslie, I'm loving our conversation and I'm kind of aware that we're coming towards the end of our show today. So how can people reach you? What is the easiest way for people to find you?
Well, I would love for people, if they feel called, to just email me. If they have any questions, I'm happy to respond. If any of your listeners writes to me, I'll send them a section of my book so that they can have a taste of what that's like. It's a gift for me.
Mhm.
My website is lesliesann.com. You can find me on Facebook. I'm really bad. I don't remember the address, but Leslie Sann, that's only one of me on the planet.
Thank you very much, Leslie. And for me, if you'd like to reach me, you can go directly to my website. So that would be www.clesiamensch.com, and I'll spell it. So that would be www.clesiamendes.com. Or if you prefer, you can find me on Facebook. So that would be facebook.com/Clésia.Mendes. Now, this would be the part of the show where I would ask Leslie what would be her parting thoughts for our audience today. And sadly, the system froze. So Leslie emailed me back and she told me that her parting thoughts for today's episode are choose peace. Thank you very much for being with us. And remember to join us again next week for another episode of Womanhood from the Inside Out. Thank you. Bye bye.